what I'm going to be talking about is the question of why occupy Wall Street. A lot of people say, well, you know, why are you focusing on the financial sector of the economy? Why aren't you focusing on the government? They're responsible for all of these problems. So you shouldn't be occupying Wall Street. You should be occupying the White House or Congress or something along those lines. So I'm going to talk about why Wall Street is the target. Another way of looking at what I'm going to say is that I'm going to be talking about the myth of the free market. We all hear about the free market. We think we live in the free market. I'm going to tell you that we live in the myth of the free market. Now, before we begin, I'm going to play a short, or have Candace actually, since I don't actually know how to run this machine. I'm going to have Candace run a short clip. This is from a debate that took place between Cornel West, who's been deeply involved in the Occupy Wall Street movement, and a guy named Peter Schiff, who is sort of a minor financial person who basically defends Wall Street right down the line. He decided to go down to Sagadi Park and interview people and basically try to make them look foolish. And then he had this debate with Cornel West. The debate will illustrate many of the points that I'm going to talk about. And basically what I want to get people to see is what we're up against in trying to claim that there's something wrong with what's taking place now.
Of what Mr. Schiff is saying here.
Well, one, I just think it's a beautiful thing that Brother Peter goes down for dialogue. Democracies are all about public discussion. I think it's very clear that the Occupy movement is very much not about hating any individuals, but rather we hate injustice, that we hate obscene inequality. And I think Peter would agree that there are human values that are not reducible to market price. There's precious human life that's not reducible to market calculation. And the real question is, how do we deal with social justice and market price? There's always a tension there, and that's where the tire hits the road.
Peter Schiff, you think these protesters should be angry at Washington, not Wall Street, but Washington didn't force financial institutions to invest in credit default swaps or offshore U.S. jobs or give themselves million-dollar bonuses. Do you think that any of the anger at banks and corporations is justified?
No.
None.
Washington did create that environment. It was the Federal Reserve that kept interest rate down at 1%. If we didn't have a central bank keeping rates so low, we never would have had all the speculation. We never would have had the mortgage bubble. And in fact, it was Freddie and Fannie, government-created entities, that were insuring all the mortgages. That was responsible for the bad behavior. You know, the people down there...
Aren't people responsible for their own bad behavior? Aren't companies and individuals supposed to be responsible rather than just blaming government for bad behavior?
Well, it's like, look, if the government liquors you up and now you're drunk and you do stupid things, I mean, you got to understand why Wall Street made all these mistakes. Remember, I was there for years warning about these problems. I saw this crisis coming from a mile away.
Government to undercut Glass-Steagall so that investment banks and commercial banks could merge so they could trade rather than lend, speculate rather than provide resources. That was
I don't doubt that.
Wall Street.
Let us finish.
From Wall Street with politicians.
Take us probably a month to go through all the inaccuracies, errors, and gross distortions that Peter Schiff was making in this, beginning with the fact that unless he's the most inept financier in the universe, there's no conceivable way that he's paying 50% of his income in taxes. It just doesn't happen. Okay? But here's the thing. Okay? We laughed and dismissed a lot of the things that he said. Okay?
Sorry about that.
But to the American populace, Peter Schiff's argument is what carries the day. Because he uses the sacred mantra, free markets, and then capitalism. And then at the end, it's free market capitalism. Okay? They become one and the same thing. Okay? The question is, why does this idea of free markets have such power? Peter Schiff probably believes that all he has to do is to drop the words, and he's won the debate already. And if you go online and listen to or read what people were saying after this took place, you'll see a lot of the people were saying exactly that. That if you want to interfere in the free market, that you're a socialist. Okay? There's nothing in between. Okay? Either you have absolute free market or you're a socialist or a communist, or if there's anything worse, you're that too.
A Vermonter.
So why does it hold such power? Well, the first reason is because of the word free. Okay? People in the United States are in love with the idea that we're free. Okay? But one of the things we should know right at the outset is that when economists use the term free market, they don't use it in the way the average person is using it. Okay? What free means is that you can do whatever you want to do with your income. Okay? So, if you make $10 a week, or if you make $1 billion a week, and you can both do whatever you want to do with your income, you are equally free in a free market. Now, a lot of people might say that freedom requires that you actually have the resources to make some choices. And what Candace's presentation demonstrated is that that's becoming more and more difficult for many people. As income becomes more unequally distributed, more and more people, maybe they're free to make whatever income they have, but if you don't have a job, that's zero. Okay? But you're still free under the definition of a free market. That's what freedom means. Okay? So what's happening then is that what economists mean by free is being taken to mean something completely different by the ideologues who want to support the absence of all kinds of government intervention. They want to think it means what we all mean by it. We can do whatever we want as long as we don't hurt somebody. But that's in fact not what it means. And if anything, what we see is that capitalism may be extraordinarily good at producing output. Okay? Even Karl Marx, okay, who hated practically every aspect of capitalism, said it's an incredible machine producing output. But what it's not so good at is distributing that output. And that's what Professor Howe's statistics reveal. We can produce a lot of output. It doesn't mean that it gets distributed in a way that all people can have a decent standard of living. Okay? Now, the second thing to note is that when this term freedom gets used, or free market gets used, okay, what's conveniently overlooked is that, or what, perhaps a better way of putting it, is what's conveniently asserted is that it's possible to have a market that's completely separate from any kind of government intervention whatsoever. That these two things can exist completely separated from one another. Okay? Now, there's a really great book that's just come out recently called Debt, the First 5,000 Years, written by an anthropologist named David Graeber, I believe is his last name. Okay? What he says is that anthropologists have been studying societies, all kinds of societies, thousands and thousands of societies, and they've never found even one, okay? Not even one, where it's the case that markets are completely separate from government. They've never existed, ever. Now, we can't take from that that means they could never possibly exist, but it is a good indication, the fact that you can't find a single example, that maybe there's something utopian in the vision that people like Schiff are putting forth, that you could somehow eliminate government completely from the market, because it's never in fact happened. Why not? Because what we know is that markets are governed by rules. Okay? And someone has to make the rules. Some institution has to make the rules. The market doesn't make it themselves. Think of a game, right? Baseball. Okay? There's a set of rules that they have to play by. The players don't make the rules. It's not like the players can get together and say, okay, today 4 strikes and you're out. Okay? Doesn't happen. The rules are made by some other governing body. Now, plenty of competition then takes place within that set of rules. Well, markets are like that as well. Markets have to have a set of rules, and the markets themselves don't determine the rules. The rules have to be determined by some other institution. It might be religious institutions. That's been true historically. It might be governments. More likely, that's been true historically. Okay? What we know is that the rules that we need in any society depend on the conditions of particular markets. What economists have discovered, for example, is if you have a small number of really large firms, you're going to need more rules to regulate it, because those large firms, small in number, have power, and they can use that power to bring about results that we probably don't want to have taking place. On the other hand, in markets where there are lots of competitors and they're small in numbers, where they can't exploit one another, then the rules don't have to be or you don't need as many rules, let's put it that way. So what we really have to ask in any given situation is, what are the rules that make sense, and who should make those rules? Okay? What's peculiar about the banking industry, and this is why Occupy Wall Street, why it's Wall Street, is that banking and finance is not an industry with a large number of small players. It's just the opposite. It's a small number of really large players. It gives them power. It gives them influence. Okay? Moreover, markets work well